My name is Margaret Winslow, and the morning I found our account empty was the morning I realized I'd been sleeping beside a stranger for 20 years. The coffee pot was still dripping. The smell of toast hung in the kitchen, and outside, Indiana sunlight spilled through the blinds like nothing had changed. But something had. The number on my laptop screen, balance 0.0, stared back at me like a death certificate. Not of a person, but of a life I thought I knew. For a long moment, I just sat there, hands hovering over the keyboard, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I typed the password wrong. Maybe the system glitched. I refreshed again and again until the screen went blurry from tears. But it didn't change. Everything, our savings, our future gone. My husband, Tom, had left early that morning for a business trip to Chicago. His suitcase by the door, his favorite mug still half full. He'd kissed my cheek and said, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." I thought it was just one of those small reassurances husbands give their wives. Now I understood it was a goodbye. I called the bank voice, trembling. A polite woman told me 2 large transfers had been made overnight to an out-of-state account. "Authorized under your husband's name," she said. Authorized. That word burned like acid. It meant this wasn't theft, it was planned. By noon, I'd gone through every drawer in the house, searching for something, anything that made sense. His watch was gone. His golf clubs. The framed picture from our 20th anniversary trip to Nashville. What he didn't take was the stack of unpaid bills in his desk or the loan statements I hadn't known existed. When the police came, the young officer looked barely 30. He stood in my kitchen with a notepad asking mechanical questions. "Any sign of foul play?" "No," I said. "Only financial." He didn't smile. "Ma'am," he said gently, "sometimes people walk away from their lives." I stared at him. Then I guess he took mine with him. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after the coffee turned cold. The refrigerator hummed steady as a heartbeat, the only sound left in the house. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but I couldn't bear to explain what had happened. I kept hearing Tom's voice. "Don't worry, you'll be fine." Fine. That word felt cruel now. The next morning, I drove to the police station, filing a missing person report I already knew wouldn't matter. On the way back, I stopped at the grocery store, out of habit, walking the aisles like a ghost. People nodded politely, unaware that my world had just collapsed between the freezer section and the checkout line. When I got home, my sister Linda was waiting on the porch. She'd heard from one of the neighbors. "You can't stay here alone," she said, wrapping me in a hug. "He might come back," I whispered. She pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. "If he does, it won't be for you, Margaret." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified: the creak of the stairs, the wind against the windows. I wandered into the bathroom and noticed his toothbrush was gone. Such a small thing, but it shattered me. People don't run from danger carrying dental hygiene. By the 3rd day, denial gave way to rage. I tore open every envelope in his desk and found one with my name on it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. In his handwriting, neat and deliberate, it said, "You'll be fine. You always are." That was it. No apology. No reason. Just that line like he'd done me a favor. I laughed, one of those hollow, shaking laughs that ends in tears. He thought leaving me broke and humiliated was faith in my strength. I folded the note back up and threw it in the trash. The following morning, I put on my coat and drove to the pawn shop on Maple Street. The man behind the counter didn't ask questions when I slid my wedding ring across the glass. He weighed it, squinted, and handed me $260 in cash. "It's not much," he said. "It's enough," I replied. Driving home, the sky was the color of dirty snow. Indiana winters have a way of pressing on you, gray, heavy, endless. But for the first time in days, I felt something other than grief. It was small, sharp, and alive. Maybe anger, maybe resolve. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. Pay the mortgage, whatever I can. Call the bank about the debt. Find work, any work. Don't fall apart. The house was still full of his ghosts, his scent on the pillow, his slippers by the bed, but I started moving them out piece by piece. Every item I boxed up felt like reclaiming oxygen. That evening, Linda called again. "You can't rebuild what he destroyed," she said softly. "Then I'll build something else," I answered. After I hung up, I noticed the trash can by the sink. The note was still there, half crumpled. His words staring up at me. "You'll be fine. You always are." For a moment, I almost believed him. I picked up my pen and wrote underneath those words, "Maybe I will be." Then I folded it back up, placed it in the drawer, and whispered to the empty kitchen, "Let's see who's right this time." The refrigerator hummed again, steady and unbothered. It sounded less lonely than before. The morning after I sold my wedding ring, I woke up before sunrise. The house felt quieter than usual, not empty, but paused, like it was holding its breath. I boiled water for instant coffee because I'd canceled the automatic shipment of the expensive beans Tom used to order. There was something strangely satisfying about the bitter taste. It was mine, cheap and honest. The first few days after he disappeared, I had lived in shock. By the end of the first week, shock had turned into survival. The mortgage company had called twice. I didn't answer the phone the third time. When you have nothing, the silence becomes its own kind of armor. I opened the front curtains and watched the sun rise over the quiet Indiana street. The world hadn't ended, though it should have. Across the road, Mrs. Henderson was out early, watering her frozen begonias, pretending not to stare. Small towns don't need headlines. They have porches. By noon, I'd gathered a stack of envelopes from the kitchen counter bills notices debts. I laid them in a neat row like corpses. One of them was from a credit card company I'd never applied to. The signature on the contract was mine, except it wasn't. Tom had forged it neat as always, looping the G in Margaret the way he knew I did. He'd built his secret life right under my name. I called the company. The woman on the phone said she couldn't discuss the account without my husband's authorization. "He's gone," I said. She paused, maybe unsure what to say. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am," she said finally. "But the balance is still due." That night, my sister Linda stopped by with groceries. She brought soup and the kind of advice that sounds like comfort, but tastes like vinegar. "You should come stay with me," she said, unpacking cans into my cabinets. "You need a plan, Margaret." "I have one," I told her. "Oh, yes, I'm staying right here." She frowned. "This house is full of ghosts." "I know," I said, "but they're mine." After she left, I sat at the table again and stared at my list. Pay the mortgage, find work, don't fall apart. I underlined the last one twice. The next morning, I drove to the diner on Route 9. The help wanted sign had been up for months. The owner, a woman named Pat, looked at me over her glasses when I asked if she still needed help. "You ever wait tables 40 years ago at a truck stop off I-65? She nodded. "Then you'll do fine. We open at 6. I started the next day. The uniform was a size too small and smelled faintly of grease, but I wore it proudly. There's a certain dignity in doing something hard when no one expects you to. I poured coffee-wiped counters and smiled at men who'd never remember my name. For the first time in weeks, I fell asleep exhausted instead of broken. On my third shift, a regular named Mrs. Daly sat at the counter. She was one of those women who carried her years like jewelry, shining unapologetic. "You're the Winslow woman, aren't you?" she asked. I hesitated. "I suppose I am." "People talk honey," she said. "Don't let it eat you alive. My husband left me in '89 with 2 kids and a mortgage. I cried for 6 months. Then I started baking pies. Been feeding the town ever since." "Pies," I said. "Sugar and grief go well together," she replied. That night, her words stayed with me. I found my old recipe notebook in the drawer beside the stove. The pages smelled faintly of cinnamon and dust. I hadn't baked in years, not since Tom complained that my pies were too sweet for real customers. I ran my fingers over the faded notes and felt something stir inside me. The next Sunday, I brought a pie to the diner apple, still warm from the oven. Pat cut a slice, tasted it, and raised her eyebrows. "You made this. I used to bake," I said. "You should again. We sell desserts at the counter, 50-50 split." That was the first real money I'd earned on my own since he left. $20. It felt like a fortune. By the end of the week, I'd baked 3 more pies, cherry pecan buttermilk. Each one sold before noon. The smell followed me home, filling the house with something softer than memory. It smelled like purpose. One night, while cleaning up the kitchen, I noticed the note again, the one he'd left in the silverware drawer. "You'll be fine. You always are." I read it slowly this time, letting the words roll over me. Maybe it wasn't an insult. Maybe it was an accident of truth. Outside, snow began to fall, turning the streetlights into halos. I opened the window and let the cold air in. It smelled like winter and freedom. I wasn't fine yet, but for the first time, I believed I could be. The new year came with more snow than I'd seen in decades. Indiana winters have a way of quieting the world, even the noise inside your own head. By January, I'd stopped waiting for Tom's return. People like him don't come home. They circle around their mistakes until there's nowhere left to land. At the diner, Pat added my pies to the daily specials board. Winslow's homemade, she called it, and customers started asking if they could order whole ones to take home. The first time someone handed me cash for 2 pecan pies, I went out to my car and cried. Not because of the money, but because it was mine, earned without apology. Still, the debt hung over me like a winter sky gray, constant, impossible to ignore. I spent evenings at the kitchen table with a calculator, adding and subtracting numbers that never quite worked out. Every check I wrote felt like a bandage over a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. One night, while sorting through old paperwork, I found an envelope tucked inside Tom's filing box. My name again, but this time the handwriting was different. Sloppier. Desperate. Inside was a single line of numbers and a bank logo I didn't recognize. I called the branch the next morning. After being transferred 3 times, a man finally told me there was a joint business loan in both our names still outstanding. "Mrs. Winslow," he said, "you're legally responsible for repayment." It took me a few seconds to respond. "Of course I am," I said, my voice calm. That's what marriage was for, wasn't it? That afternoon, I walked to the post office and mailed a check for the first month's payment. The clerk looked at me with sympathy. "Hard year?" she asked. "Just a long one," I said. By February, I'd fallen into a rhythm: mornings at the diner, afternoons, baking evenings, balancing what little I had. The house, once a museum of his things, had started to look like mine again. I painted the kitchen cabinets pale yellow, not because I liked the color, but because he hated it. Every brushstroke felt like a small rebellion. One Saturday, Mrs. Daly dropped by unannounced, carrying a box of old baking tins. "For your shop," she said. "I don't have a shop," I laughed. "Not yet," she winked. "But you bake like someone who will." I started taking small orders from neighbors' pies, for birthdays, cobblers, for church potlucks. Word spread the way good smells do. The mailman began leaving notes with his deliveries. 1 blueberry pie, please, Friday. By spring, the orders were steady enough that I could cut back my shifts at the diner. One Sunday afternoon, as I was closing up my kitchen, I found a photograph wedged behind the refrigerator. It was from our anniversary trip, Tom and me standing in front of a rented cabin, smiling like strangers pretending to be in love. I stared at it for a long time before sliding it into the trash. Not out of anger, but mercy. Some memories deserve burial. A few days later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name written in the same familiar loops. My heart thudded. I opened it slowly. Inside was a check unsigned and a single line. I'm sorry. You'll be fine. No signature, no explanation. Just that echo again. I tore it in half and threw it in the sink. Water from the faucet blurred the ink until the words disappeared. If he wanted to make peace, he could start by facing what he'd done, not hiding behind the same tired phrase. That night, Mrs. Daly called. I saw your pies at the church market, she said. They sold out before noon. You might want to think bigger. Bigger, I asked. You've got more than a recipe, Margaret. You've got a story. People taste it. Her words stayed with me. I started thinking about names for a bakery. Winslow's pies didn't sit right. It still carried his shadow. So one morning, I stood in front of the window where sunlight poured across the counter and wrote down 3 words on a napkin, the second slice. That's what my life felt like, a second chance, a piece I finally got to keep for myself. By early spring, I had regular customers enough to make small payments on the mortgage and the loans. Each pie that left my kitchen carried something heavier than sugar. It carried my proof that he hadn't destroyed me. One afternoon, while cleaning out the storage room, I came across his old work jacket. It still smelled faintly of motor oil and his cologne. I hung it on a nail by the back door, not as a keepsake, but as a warning. Every time I passed it, I whispered, "Not again." The day the first robin appeared in the yard, I baked a pie without looking at the recipe. My hands knew the rhythm, flour, sugar, butter, fold, fill, breathe. When it came out golden, I sat at the table and took the first bite. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time since he left, I didn't cry. Spring rolled in slow, like it was afraid of waking me too fast. The snow melted in streaks along the road, and the tulips out front poked their heads through the mud. For the first time in months, I left the house without my coat. The air still carried a bite, but it smelled of possibility of things not yet broken. By April, my kitchen had turned into a small business. The counters were always dusted with flour, the oven never cold. I kept a notebook by the window where I wrote down each order, every name. The church ladies called me the Pie Woman. I didn't correct them. Mrs. Daly helped me fill out the paperwork to rent a booth at the Bloomfield Farmers Market. You've earned your place, she said. People trust you now they taste your story. I laughed, brushing powdered sugar off my hands. I'm not a story, I'm a mess. Messes sell honey, she said. Perfect people are boring. The market opened the first weekend of May. I set up a folding table with a red checkered cloth, 3 pie stands, and a sign painted by Linda Margaret's second slice. The name made people smile before they even tasted the pie. The first customer was a boy no older than 20 buying a slice for his grandmother. The second was a retired mechanic who told me it reminded him of his late wife's baking. By noon, every pie was gone. When I counted the money, my hands trembled. $112. It felt like the first honest victory of my life. That evening, I stopped by the diner to tell Pat. She poured me a coffee and said, "Well, look at that. You went from waitressing to feeding the whole town. Guess you were right. You are fine." The words hit different now. I smiled. I think I'm getting there. But life never stays quiet for long. A week later, I came home from the market and saw a familiar car parked across the street, navy blue, dust-covered, idling too long. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when the door opened and he stepped out, the world tilted. Tom? He looked thinner, older, like life had worn him down to the edges. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and his shoulders sagged beneath a wrinkled jacket. I froze on the porch, my grocery bag slipping from my hand. Apples rolled down the steps. "Margaret," he said quietly. His voice hadn't changed. That was the cruelest part. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just looked around at the porch he'd built, the wind chimes I'd replaced, the tulips he'd never planted. "You've been busy," he said. I crossed my arms. "You didn't come here to compliment my gardening." He sighed. "I made mistakes. I didn't mean to steal from me," I interrupted. "Forge my name? Disappear?" He winced. "I thought I was helping. You always worried too much about money." "Because it was real," I said. "Unlike your promises." He stared at the ground. "I hit a bad streak. I thought if I could fix it before you found out, maybe we could—" His voice trailed off. "I just needed time. 20 years wasn't enough." For a moment we just stood there, two strangers on the same patch of earth, bound by a history neither of us wanted anymore. Finally, he said, "I want to make things right." I laughed softly. "Right, you left me with nothing." He looked toward the window, where the faint smell of baked apples drifted out. "You made something of it." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. Like he couldn't decide whether to be proud or jealous. "I can't stay long," he said. "I just wanted to see you." "You've seen me," I replied. "Now go." He nodded, once eyes damp, but not sorry enough. "You'll be fine," he said again, just like before. I stepped closer. "You keep saying that, Tom, but you never ask if I already am." He opened his mouth, closed it again, and walked back to the car. When he drove off, the taillights disappeared into the dusk like a fading memory. I stood there until the street fell dark, then went inside. My hands shook as I locked the door, not from fear, from finality. That night, I didn't cry. I baked instead. Apple crumble, cherry lattice, pecan. Each one for every year I'd wasted waiting for someone to change. The next morning, I boxed them up and donated them to the church. The pastor thanked me, said, "You have a gift." I smiled. "It's just practice," I said. But it wasn't. It was release. In June, the market grew busier. Tourists came through, and one of them, a young reporter from Bloomington, asked if he could interview me. "A small-town woman builds a new life from scratch," he said. People love stories like that. He took pictures, my hands dusted with flower pies cooling by the window, my old wedding ring mark, faint but visible. A week later, the article appeared online. The woman who baked her life back. When I saw it, I sat in silence for a long time. Tom's words echoed again. "You'll be fine." Maybe I already was. That night, I stood on the porch and looked up at the stars. Indiana skies don't glitter like they do in movies. They hum quiet and steady. I realized I'd stopped waiting for anything. Not for closure, not for apology. Just peace. And for the first time in 20 years, it felt within reach. The article changed everything. By July, strangers were showing up at my booth before sunrise, asking if the lady from the paper still had pies left. A woman from the next town over ordered 6 for a church picnic. A retired teacher bought one for every neighbor on her street. And by the end of summer, the farmer's market manager offered me a permanent stall, a corner spot near the entrance. It felt like winning a medal I didn't know I'd been competing for. But success, I learned, carries its own kind of noise. Whispers followed me now, not of pity, but curiosity. People wanted to know the story behind the smile, the house, the woman who baked her life back. Some thought it was romantic, others tragic. The truth was neither. It was just survival, one pie at a time. Then one morning, a man appeared at my booth, tall, silver-haired, with kind eyes, and the kind of quiet posture you only see in people who've been humbled by life. He bought a cherry pie and asked if I needed help loading boxes. I said no out of habit. But he stayed anyway, chatting with customers and lifting crates like it was second nature. His name was Harold, a widower. Lost his wife to cancer 4 years ago. Retired from a hardware store job. He lived 2 streets over and had seen my picture in the paper. I figured anyone who can make crust that flaky probably knows something about patience, he said, with a half smile. I didn't think much of it at first. Kindness often comes disguised as small talk in Indiana. But over the next few weeks, he kept showing up. Some days he'd bring coffee, other days just company. He never asked questions about Tom or the past. He talked about his garden, the local high school football team, how he still couldn't bring himself to throw away his wife's old recipe box. Some things aren't meant to be forgotten, he said once. Some things are, I replied. He smiled. I guess that's what balance means. By late August, I'd started to look forward to Saturdays. Not because of the sales, but because of the quiet rhythm Harold brought with him. He'd show up early, help me set up, and stay late to help clean. Once, when the wind caught my sign and nearly blew it down the street, he chased after it, laughing. "You're fast for a man your age," I told him. "Fear of embarrassment is great cardio," he said. That laughter-light, simple human was something I hadn't heard in years. But then came the letter. It was a Thursday evening just after I'd closed the kitchen. A plain envelope, my name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a short message from the bank. Mrs. Winslow. A man named Thomas Winslow recently inquired about your business account. We declined to share details but thought you should be aware. My hand froze. For a long time, all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator. He was back, again. I sat at the table staring at the words until the paper blurred. What did he want now? Money, credit, recognition. The bakery was modest, not some gold mine. But maybe he didn't want what I had. Maybe he just couldn't stand that I'd built something without him. The next morning I told Harold. He listened quietly, then said, "Men like that don't show up because they want closure. They show up because they see what they lost." "What should I do?" I asked. "Keep baking," he said. "Keep living. Let him chase ghosts." But fear has a way of crawling back in. That night, every creak in the house felt like footsteps. Every car engine down the road sounded like his. I checked the locks twice, then sat by the window with a cup of tea until dawn. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing happened. But the silence felt loaded, like the calm before a storm. Then one cold October evening, I was closing up the bakery. Yes, a real bakery now. I'd rented a small corner space downtown, painted the walls soft cream, hung lace curtains. The bell above the door jingled, and I turned, expecting Harold. It wasn't him. Tom stood in the doorway, thinner than ever, but with that same polished look, expensive coat, empty eyes. "Hi, Maggie," he said, his voice low. "You look good." I froze. "Don't call me that." He looked around the bakery, his gaze sweeping over the counters, the glowing ovens, the sign that read, "Second Slice Bakery. Since 2024. "You really did it," he said softly. "You turned my mess into something beautiful." "Your mess," I repeated. "You emptied our account, forged my name, and disappeared. You don't get credit for my healing." He raised his hands like he wanted peace. I came to apologize. Apology denied, I said. He stepped closer. I lost everything, Margaret. I've been sleeping in motels trying to find work. I just thought maybe we could. Could what? I cut him off. Start over. Pretend the last 2 years didn't happen. His voice cracked. You were always stronger than me. I had to be. We stood in silence, the hum of the ovens filling the air. He looked smaller now, not just older, but emptied of the arrogance that once defined him. Finally, he whispered, "Can I come home?" I took a breath, steady and slow. "You're standing in it," I said, "and you don't belong here anymore." The bell over the door jingled again. Harold stepped in, carrying a box of supplies. His eyes flicked from me to Tom, understanding immediately. "Everything okay?" "Just closing up," I said. Tom's face twisted. "Who's this, a friend?" I said. "Someone who doesn't disappear when life gets hard." Harold set the box down carefully. "You should leave, sir." Tom hesitated, eyes darting between us. "You really moved on." I nodded. "That's what people do when they survive." He swallowed hard, turned toward the door and paused. "You'll be fine," he said again. This time I smiled. "I already am." The bell rang softly as he left. Harold didn't speak for a while. Then he asked, "You okay?" "Yes," I said. For the first time, that wasn't a lie. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit arrived. It came in a plain envelope from the Bloomfield County Courthouse, heavy with papers that smelled like ink and arrogance. The letterhead read Carver versus Carver. I'd changed my name back to Winslow too late to avoid the paperwork. He was suing me for half the bakery. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the words until they lost meaning. The idea was absurd, almost comical. The man who left me with nothing was now demanding a share of what I built from the ruins. When I called Linda, she nearly shouted through the phone, "He's out of his mind. You can't let him get away with that." "Oh, I don't plan to," I said quietly, "but it's going to cost me." That afternoon, I met with a local lawyer named Mr. Jensen, tall, polite, and honest in a way that lawyers rarely are. He flipped through the papers occasionally, muttering under his breath. "He's claiming marital property rights," he explained. "He says the bakery's success was built on joint assets." "Joint assets," I laughed. "He took those with him." Mr. Jensen nodded. "Unfortunately, the law doesn't care about irony. But if you've kept records, receipts, invoices, anything that proves you built this after he left, we can win. I've kept everything I said, even the bills I couldn't pay." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll turn your pain into evidence." The first court date was set for February. Harold insisted on driving me. "You don't have to come," I told him. "I know," he said. "That's why I want to." The courthouse smelled of old wood and colder memories. I sat on the front bench, clutching a folder thick with documents, every ingredient purchase, every customer receipt, every tax form since the day he disappeared. When Tom walked in, my stomach twisted. He looked worse than before, pale, hollow, and wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge, a woman with gray hair and sharp glasses, called the room to order. "We're here to discuss the financial dispute between Thomas and Margaret Carver regarding ownership of a business established after separation." Tom's lawyer spoke first. "Your Honor, my client supported Mrs. Carver for 20 years. The bakery would not exist without the foundation he provided." Foundation. The word burned. Mr. Jensen rose, calm and deliberate. "Your Honor, the so-called foundation my client's husband refers to is the same one he demolished when he emptied their joint account and disappeared. Mrs. Carver built her business and her life from zero." The judge turned to me. "Do you have proof?" "Yes, Your Honor." I said, my voice steady. I handed her the folder. Every pie sold, every receipt, every bill paid with my own earnings. For an hour, the courtroom filled with the sound of pages turning and evidence stacking up like bricks in a wall. I could feel Tom shrinking behind his lawyer's table, every number a nail sealing his coffin of excuses. Finally, the judge looked at him. "Mr. Carver, is it true you left your wife without financial support?" He hesitated. "Yes. And you now wish to claim half of a business she created afterward." He cleared his throat. "I believed in her," he said weakly. A ripple of laughter spread through the courtroom. Even the judge's lips twitched. "Belief," she said, "is not a financial asset." Case dismissed. The gavel fell. Just like that, it was over. Outside, snow drifted gently across the courthouse steps. Harold took my hand as we walked to the car. "You did it," he said. I shook my head. "No, I just stopped losing." Tom was sitting on the bottom step, his shoulders slumped. For a moment, I almost walked past him. But something in me, the part that still believed in closure, stopped. He looked up. "You won," he said quietly. "I did," I answered. "And it's not about money." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I don't have anywhere to go." I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a check $2,000. Enough for him to start over, or at least stop begging. He frowned. "What's this?" "It's not forgiveness," I said. "It's freedom. You owe me nothing now." He blinked. "Why would you do this after everything?" "Because I'm not you." He looked away, tears tracing the lines of his face. "You really did fine, didn't you?" I smiled faintly. "You were right all along." I always was. Harold didn't speak on the drive home. When we reached my house, he turned to me. "You gave him money?" "Peace isn't free," I said. "But it's cheaper than resentment." That night, I pulled out my old notebook, the one where it all began. On the first page, I'd written, "Day 1 life after 0-0. Now I added a new line beneath it. Day 512, balance restored. I closed the book, exhaled, and let the quiet finally sound like victory. A year later, the bakery no longer smelled like survival. It smelled like life. The sign above the door now read, "Winslow's Corner Bakery," gold lettering on cream wood, sun-faded, just enough to look like it had always been there. The windows glowed each morning before sunrise, and when I flipped the lights on, the hum of the ovens filled the air like music. By then, I had 3 employees: June, a retired nurse who kneaded dough with the precision of a heartbeat; Tanya, a single mother who laughed even when life didn't give her a reason; and Alma, a widow who'd lost her husband the same year I lost mine, just in a different way. Together we ran the bakery like clockwork. We didn't talk much while we worked, but the silence was comfortable, like the rhythm of friendship that didn't need to be spoken. The regulars came and went as they always did, the postman at 7, the teacher at 8:30, the pastor's wife before 9. Harold still stopped by every morning, always with that same line. "You got my cherry pie ready, boss," and every time I'd hand it to him with a smile. He'd become a fixture in my days, though not in a way that demanded anything. He helped fix shelves, changed light bulbs, and once, during a summer storm, stood outside holding an umbrella over the delivery truck while I carried boxes in. "Someone's got to make sure the pies don't drown," he said, grinning through the rain. In another life, maybe I would have fallen in love with him. Maybe I still could. But peace had become my priority, and peace doesn't demand flowers or promises. It just asks to be kept. One quiet afternoon, I sat by the front window counting the register. The numbers added up neatly for once. For years, math had been my enemy, always taking more than it gave. But now everything balanced. Not just the books, but me. Outside, Mrs. Daly waved as she crossed the street with her granddaughter. "Business is good," she called through the glass. "Better than good," I said. She smiled. "Told you sugar and grief go well together." When she left, I leaned back in my chair, the late spring light pouring through the lace curtains. The air smelled of vanilla and butter, and a little bit of forgiveness. Then came the letter. It arrived in the afternoon mail, plain white envelope, unfamiliar handwriting. I almost tossed it aside, but something about the slant of the letters made me pause. I opened it carefully. "Dear Margaret, I've been staying at a shelter in Ohio. I used the money you gave me to get help to get sober. I don't deserve your kindness, but I wanted you to know it mattered. You were right. I was wrong. I hope you're well. Tom." I sat there for a long time, the hum of the ovens soft behind me. No anger came. No satisfaction either. Just a calm, distant sort of understanding. For the first time since he left, I didn't feel anything tied to his name, not hate, not hurt. Just release. I folded the letter, slipped it into the old notebook, and tucked it between the first and last pages. It didn't belong in the middle anymore. The following Sunday, Harold asked if I'd join him at church. I hadn't been in months. I wasn't angry at God, I just hadn't had the time to sit still. But that morning, I put on my navy dress and went. The pastor's sermon was about restoration, how some things are meant to be broken, not so they can return to what they were, but so they can become something new. I sat in the back pew, sunlight pooling through the stained glass, and thought about how long it had taken me to understand that. After the service, Harold walked me to the car. "You were quiet today," he said. "I was listening," I told him. "To what?" "To the sound of nothing missing." He chuckled softly. "That's a rare kind of quiet." "It is," I said. That summer, the bakery hosted a small-town pie contest. My idea. I wanted to give back to the place that had carried me when I didn't have the strength to carry myself. Women lined up with pies of every shape and flavor. June brought her lemon meringue, Tanya baked a blackberry crumble, and Alma, bold as ever, made a bourbon pecan that won first prize. As the crowd clapped and laughed, I stood back, letting them take the spotlight. It wasn't false modesty. I'd had my turn. This was theirs. A local reporter took a group photo. "Mrs. Winslow, smile," she said, and I did a real smile this time, not the kind that hides pain behind politeness. That evening, after the fair ended and the booths came down, Harold walked me home. We didn't talk much. The air smelled of sugar and sawdust and late summer. When we reached the porch, he paused. "Margaret," he said quietly, "I've been meaning to ask you something." I waited. He took a breath. "Would you ever consider dinner? A real one, not pie." I smiled. "Dinner, maybe. Marriage, no." He laughed, that deep, kind sound I'd come to recognize. Fair enough. I watched him walk away, the streetlight catching the silver in his hair. Then I turned toward the house, my house, and for the first time, it didn't feel empty. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, opened the notebook again, and wrote slowly, carefully. Balance $12,842.67. But that's not the real balance. The real one is between who I was and who I became. I paused, then added, I once thought marriage was the safest place to keep your heart. Now I know the safest place is in your own hands. I closed the book, smiled to myself, and whispered into the quiet 20 years beside a man in debt. He left me. I left his name. He left the debt. I left my own. And that's not the end. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was redemption. If you've ever lost everything and built yourself back up, share your story. Someone out there needs your voice.